I am Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. This week's episode, we sit down with Jennifer and Adam, two experienced mountain climbers from the state of Colorado. Listen in as they tell their story of the most feared aspect of mountain climbing, the fall.
And I was behind because I stopped to put my spikes on, and I just saw her shoot down, try to self-arrest, and go over the edge. And I froze, and I was sure she was dead.
And there's a twist in this story. There was an additional climber on board. Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. Today's story is Jennifer and her climbing partner, Adam. It's the ultimate story of everyone's worst fear when on a mountain, and that's falling. Jennifer, I'm glad you're here today. And when I say that to a lot of people, I just meant that we're just glad they're here today. But in this case, I'm really glad you're actually here today.
Thank you, me too.
Adam, how are you?
Great, thanks for having me.
Her climbing partner?
Yeah, kind of her Sherpa more than anything.
We're going to get your perspective on this story because I think that would be my second worst fear. The first fear is falling. The second fear is having to watch somebody, right? I mean, I think every mountain person in the world would say those are the two biggest fears that they would probably come across. So we're going to jump right into your story. I want you to tell me the story about that day.
Okay. So Adam and I were camping in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in a little spot called South Colony Lakes, just outside the town of Westcliff. And we had set up camp. We'd hiked in the night before. We set up camp and decided we were going to go summit this peak called Crestone Peak. And we got up early in the morning and headed out and started making our way gradually up this pass called Broken Hand Pass. Got on the other side of that, decided that we were going to go ahead and everything looked dry on the other side. We had actually encountered snow on the way up Broken Hand Pass. And then we decided when we got to the backside, it looked nice and dry. So we were like, okay, we're going to go for this peak called Crestone Peak, which is one of Colorado's 14ers. We headed up, and when we got to the base of what's called the Red Gully is the standard route on that peak, we found it to be holding quite a bit of snow. But there was enough dry rock that we decided we're going to make it. And so we ended up climbing up. And when we got closer to the top, Adam actually decided to stay on the rock, and I decided to climb the snow. And so we climbed separately, and I found that the snow was getting pretty challenging late morning. It was getting kind of loose. And so we ended up summiting, and then we decided at the summit that snow was no good, and we were not going to try to down climb that by any stretch, that we were going to try to stick to what's called Class 4 rock. It's like a step below roped rock climbing.
And I think that's important here, too, to understand for everybody. You guys are not novice. You have done this a lot.
We've done this a fair amount, yeah.
Yeah, so was this the first time you tried to climb this mountain?
This is the first time I tried to climb this mountain.
Okay, so you didn't know exactly what to expect at this point, but you weren't novice. You have climbed before both of you had climbed. So what we considered experienced climbers.
Yeah, and I had actually climbed its neighboring peak, Crestone Needle, a couple years before, and that we had been actually in the same area camping several other times and had done a couple of other neighboring peaks prior to tackling this one.
Okay.
So I was familiar with the area.
Okay, so it's new. This is first time, but you're using your knowledge, and you're like, ooh, snow's not good.
Snow's not good. Yeah.
Okay.
And it was getting softer by the minute in the warm sun, right? It was pretty warm that day. We had a blue sky day, right?
Right.
And so on the way down, we actually saw one other person on the summit, and this guy came running up out of nowhere with just 2 little water bottles on and a tank top, no backpack.
He didn't have a shirt on.
No, he did. Yeah, he just water bottles. So we saw this guy, and he actually started down before us, and Adam and I started down, and I started actually down in lead on the rock, and we actually ended up kicking a couple of rocks down this guy's direction. So we actually kind of held back for a few minutes to give him some space, not to hurt him. And we did pretty well down climbing the rock. We're making some good progress down climbing the rock for a while. And we got to a point where actually we had to do a snow crossing. We had no choice but to cross the snow. And so this is where my accident happens. The snow crossing was no bigger than, a small living room. But it was the tip of a rather large snowfield that ran into this gully. And then this gully then turns into a waterfall and drops about 1,500 feet down to the valley. And the standard climbing route is underneath of that snow, and next to this water that runs, down to the valley floor. And so I was crossing this. I was in front. I started crossing, and it was pretty good snow the first few steps that I stepped in. And then I got about 3/4 of the way across. It started getting kind of icy, like the snow had frozen and thawed kind of a thing, and it was still sort of frozen. But there was footprints in it from somebody else having gone prior. So I got my ice axe out at this point and started trying to stop and kick steps. And Adam was back. He's putting his spikes on. And this is when I slipped and fell. And in my initial part of the fall, I was on the snowfield and I had my ice axe with me. And so I tried 3 times to do what's called a self-arrest, where you take the axe and you roll over and try to get some purchase into the snow to stop you. And I tried that 3 times and it was no go. And I have a very vivid memory of this ice axe dragging on ice.
So we see that in the movies. You'll see them and they're sliding down. They're trying to connect those things.
Yeah.
You did not have spikes on.
I did not have spikes on.
So you're digging this thing in. Now, how far did you have to go down where there was no longer snow?
I honestly don't know how long I fell in the snow, but it was 3 times that I tried to self-arrest. And the 3rd time that I tried to self-arrest, it actually flipped my weight over to where I was now head first instead of feet first down the hill. So I went into the waterfall feet first. And that waterfall, like I said, this thing drops 1,500 feet down to the valley. And I just started getting kind of tossed and bumped around. And the key thing that kind of, I assumed this was over, right? As soon as I hit that waterfall, I thought, okay, it's just a matter of the next bump that I hit is gonna be blackout.
Which I'm glad you brought that up, because I think this is our worst nightmare. Anytime we've ever been on a high road or whatever, and you're looking over thinking, oh my God, if you take one wrong step, you're gonna end up you're dead, right?
Yeah.
Did you literally recall thinking that?
Oh,
as
yeah.
soon as I hit that water, I'm...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as soon as I thought my ice axe was my hoe, right?
Right.
The fact that I was on the snow, because the snow doesn't hurt. I was like, okay, I got 3 times here to get this. And when it didn't go and I end up in that rock, I was like, this is it. This thing goes all the way to the valley floor. I'm not going to make this. But as I was falling too, the other thing that kind of went through my head, which was a really bizarro thought, but was... I've done whitewater rafting, and I thought you got to get your feet downhill. You got to get your feet downhill, which is what they tell you if you fall out of the boat, right? You got to point your feet downstream. And for whatever reason, that was going through my head also. And so I was able to get my feet downhill. And as soon as I kind of flipped myself around, I actually did get my foot caught in a rock. And that's what brought me, to a stop. And so I found myself sitting in really cold, runoff water, with my foot kind of jammed in this rock, and thankfully did not fall the full, distance.
But how far did you fall?
Around 250 feet, approximately.
And was it pretty much just all the way down, and then your foot is what anchored you into that rock?
Yeah, that was a very abrupt, my foot got caught in this rock, and it was a very abrupt, stop, to the point where, right when I first finished, everything was spinning, back and forth kind of thing, and I wasn't even really sure if I was alive or if this was unreal. It took me a couple of seconds to really process, okay, what's happened?
I want to hear that. I want to hear that. What was the first thoughts? Were you like, oh my God, I'm alive?
I don't think it was that quick, honestly. It was kind of okay, so I'm spinning, things are blurry, I was trying to get my vision sort of back, and then I started sort of feeling my face and my lip, and I found blood on my hand. And so yes, that's when I think I was like, okay, I'm alive, and nothing really hurt yet. Obviously when I was falling, some of those hits kind of hurt, but nothing really quite hurt yet. And so I actually tried to, after I stopped spinning, I was smart enough not to try to stand up again, right? But after things stopped spinning, I did slowly start to try to stand up, and that's when I was like, oh, this is a no-go. I cannot stand up. And then after that, I was like, okay, well, maybe, because I was in really cold water, very cold water. I was like, okay, well, maybe I could crawl out, using my hands. And that was a no-go too. And so at that point, I was like, I need Adam.
Yeah.
And so I actually started yelling for him, because I thought, well, A, he probably just thinks I'm not around anymore. and B, like he may not know exactly where I am, you know, or how far up. So I started calling, for Adam like as loudly as I could, and that's when, you know, several minutes later, I don't even know how long that time was, but at one point I look up and I see him coming my way, right?
So you also had another climbing partner that day.
Yes. At the time I was 10 weeks pregnant with my first child.
And that had to have crossed your mind at that point.
Absolutely. I mean, I had just told Adam, he was the first person besides my husband and I, that I had told, and we had discussed it before I left the house to go on this trip. Like, hey, should I tell Adam? And I had some terrible morning sickness. So I was like, he's going to figure this out if I don't let him know. So we had told him that I was pregnant on the car ride in. And yeah, I think I shocked him a little bit with that one.
Of course, 10 weeks, you're not showing that much
No.
of any. And you felt like all your motor coordination, everything was everything was the same. It was like you weren't really pregnant, but you were pregnant.
Yeah, I mean, I had some bad morning sickness.
Yeah.
But I'd rather be outside thrown up than sitting in my house. Like, I'm that type, right? So,
So you're touching your face, you feel the blood, you're like, okay, I'm alive. Now what happens from that point? Where did the rescue come in? Tell me all about that.
yeah, so like I said, I tried to stand up, and then I realized that wasn't a go. My leg hurt excruciatingly. I pulled up my pant leg and saw that something was not right with my knee. You know, I thought maybe my femur or something was sticking through. Like, I actually had something like sticking up on the end of my knee. And then, you know, trying to pull out the ribs of my back, you know, that was like, I thought maybe I'd broken my back.
Yeah.
Had a lot of pain in my back. So Adam comes climbing down, and he gets to me, and he had to pull me out of the water, like under my arms, and drag me up onto this rock. And it was a crappy rock that we got stuck on. But it was dry, right? And it was a piece of rock that was between the water ran to both sides of it. So we were kind of stuck on this like rock island,
Right.
almost. And the next drop beyond that was pretty substantial, right? So kind of like, we're very fortunate that but it was we had a steep drop, and we're looking, 1,500 feet down to the valley floor here. And so Adam got out what's called a spot device. It's a GPS satellite tracker that you can call search and rescue with. And then he was very fortunate to have cell phone coverage for a brief period of time, and was able to call 911 also to get a hold of the county sheriff. And so they started, a rescue mission. And I fell at 1:15 in the afternoon, and at like 7:30 at night, we saw our first help.
So I think something important, that water temperature is probably what, 40s?
Just
It's
above
cold.
freezing.
Yeah, just above freezing.
So were you hypothermic? Were you?
I wouldn't say I was yet, but I was wet, right? Like, at that point in time, I'd been sitting in the water for a little while, and my shoes were soaked, my shirt was soaked. Thankfully, we had extra layers, so I was able to take off some stuff and put on some dry stuff out of my backpack. But over the course of sitting out there for 6 hours, we did get hypothermic.
Yeah, and in the injuries, obviously that's when all the pain is starting in and all that good stuff. But there was no you rescuing her. We're gonna get to your story because this is a great second way I happen to watch it, right? But there's no way you're rescuing her.
No,
That drop is straight down. There's no way.
Well, she was a little woozy, and I wasn't sure she had hit her head or something like
Right.
that. And the only reason she could stay on the rock is if I put my arms around her, didn't let her kind of sit, and just kept her propped up. So there was no way I was going down.
Yeah.
I was staying.
Now, at any point in time when you're sitting there, are you worried that even rescuers might not even be able to get to you?
Absolutely. There's several times that you think about, okay, this isn't like, I'm not coming home from this, or, you just don't know what it looks like. The other thing you're worrying about is whether or not the weather's going to change. Thankfully, we had perfect weather that day, but, if you have any kind of rain move in or any kind of weather, it obviously is going to deter any kind of rescue efforts. And we knew they were sending a helicopter. Adam had actually asked for one. I said, hey, You phrase it best, but
Yeah, I put in the text because I was able to text with Cindy, who was the head of search and rescue, and I was like, "Hey, I know everyone probably says this, but please, we really need a helicopter. We're not going to be able to hike down." So,
Right.
Yeah, and they did.
Yeah, the steepness of it. There's no
Yeah,
trail. There's no
yeah.
anything.
Nope.
It's helicopter or nothing, right?
Yeah.
At this point.
well, it's a combination of both actually. So they did end up bringing the National Guard brought in a Black Hawk, and along with a medical helicopter, and they did try to do a air hoist, but it was a no-go because of the air currents up above. And so what ended up happening was, they ended up getting like 14 different search and rescue people in there over the course of, those hours. And they ended up putting me in a litter and lowering me using like rock climbing equipment, 1,500 feet down to the valley floor. And then at 1 o'clock in the morning, the National Guard was able to do an airlift.
Okay, so they didn't drop a basket down from a helicopter. The litter that you're talking about, because I'm not a mountain climber, but the litter, is that kind of like one of those baskets too, but they're shimming you down the mountain on that?
Where you hook up to just a bunch of rock climbing equipment, and then they have 6 search and rescue people on it at any point in time, walking it down, and then they have a bunch of others that are setting ropes and anchors at the same time. And they had to do this in the dark, by the way.
Well, that's what I was getting ready to ask, because if it's that time, yeah, it's getting ready to be dark, right?
Yeah.
Would you have made it if you'd had to stay there overnight?
It's really hard to know. I mean, I had
being cold, being broken up.
Yeah, I had a collapsed lung, and I think my time search and rescue got to me, my pulse ox was 74.
Yeah.
So
I don't think you'd have been here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Holy mackerel! What a heck of a story. So they get you down. The National Guard then put you in a helicopter. Where do they take you to?
So they took me to the town of Crestone, into a little tiny grass field, and switched me out to a medical helicopter. And then that medical helicopter flew me to Colorado Springs, to UC Health down in Colorado Springs.
And then that's when they started working on you. And
yeah, the guys in the medical helicopter basically tried to make me comfortable, right? That was when I got my first dilaudid.
Right.
And then, as soon as I arrived at the hospital, it was a flurry of, 20 people escorting you down to trauma, and then all those people working on lots of different things all at the same time.
Now, I got to ask this question. So when did your husband first find out? He's sitting at home, and he knows that at a certain point you're coming home, right? Or were you camping that night?
We know we were due home that night. Adam and I's plan was to hike back out, pack up our tents, and then go back to the car and drive the 4 hours home. So he first got notified because Adam's spot device called search and rescue, and that immediately notified Adam's wife. And Adam lived right across the street from us at the time. So Adam's wife went over and knocked on the door and told my husband, hey, Adam's device has gone off.
So, but they didn't know at that time who was in trouble.
Who it was. No.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Ooh, your story keeps getting better and better as we go too. So when does he find out? Not until you're into the.
So I don't know exactly how long from then, but I don't think it was that much longer.
Well, I texted him while I still had. I carry like a battery in my backpack where I could normally just indefinitely keep my phone charged, but for some reason that failed that day. So I only had maybe half hour of texting capability. So I let Justin know really quickly what was happening.
While you were on the mountain?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, and of course, he knows, obviously, you're pregnant. And, man, I can't even imagine. Hey, Producer Chad, I think we need to have him on here, too, because that's a hell of a story just by itself, too. I mean, I can't even fathom that. My God. And you're 4 hours away. Oh, my goodness. That's intense. So you get down, they start fixing you up, and now at this point, you're living. They're telling you, hey, you're going to be alive, and everything's good. So let's go through the injuries that happened, just so everybody knows what all was injured, and then make sure everything is still good. So you had the collapsed lung.
I had a collapsed lung and 3 broken ribs on that side. I shattered my patella on my left leg, so I lost half of that in the accident. And then I broke my right foot, and the one that stopped my fall, thankfully, in several different places, and had to have a plate put in that foot. And then I had some pelvic fractures and, as you can imagine, some pretty severe bruising and road rash.
But all in all, are you pretty healed up?
Yeah, I mean, you're not the same after
Right.
an accident like that. But I would say that I'm very, very fortunate in that, I didn't have a head injury. I didn't have a spinal injury. For the length that I fell, I got off very, very easy.
Yeah, I do think that is certainly something that I would say, a little divine intervention going on there.
Yeah.
The other question that, I think was on everybody's mind, do you climb at all with fear?
Absolutely. I never had a fear of heights prior to this accident, and I have a healthy fear of heights these days. I mean, even I've walked into the Broncos stadium and gotten on the escalator and had a little bit of a panic attack.
Yes. So this is
Yeah.
a mountain climber, but a traumatic event like that changed that.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
have a very healthy fear of heights these days, but it's good, right? I did not have that prior to this.
Right. And
So-
still, is that a demon that you battle when you go do some of the climbing you're still doing?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Even given to the point where you get a little anxiety and so on and so forth, but you just power through it. And then when you get to the
Yes.
top, does it go away? Or not until you're back in the car?
No, I would say so. Usually when you do these hikes, it's not like it's sustained horrible climbing the whole time, right? But
Right.
but the pieces where it is, I definitely breathe a little easier when I can get back on just a trail. That I'm like, okay, if I slip and fall here, I'm just gonna get dirt on my butt and not
Right.
die.
Right.
Like,
Good
there's-
for you, though. I mean, that's an amazing story. I mean, it's just amazing that, and then you also are kind of powering through that fear, so to speak, to go. I mean, that's just motivational in and of itself, right? All right, Adam. Dude, that's the second worst thing, right? After the fall is having to watch somebody. Explain it to me when she's in front of you. She was taking lead.
Mhm.
Did you see it? Did you see the slip happen?
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, she was using some colorful language to describe the conditions at that point. I'm not sure if this is a family-friendly podcast. So
We want it all. We
we'll-
want it all.
So we'll leave that out. I was behind because I stopped to put my spikes on, and I just saw her shoot down, try to self-arrest, and go over the edge. And I froze.
So did you lose sight of her?
Oh yeah,
So when she's sliding down there, there's a certain point where it goes down, I guess, and you lost sight.
and I was sure she was dead. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. So I just kind of processed what I just saw, and I froze. I mean, you think, oh, I'm going to be so brave and so just I guess macho in these types of environments, but I'll be honest, I froze. I just a lot of things flashed before me. Just saw one of my best friends just die. And I've got 2 kids at home. I've got Justin at home. That's all that's kind of going through my head. But then once I got my act together, I was like, hey, if she's still alive, I'm not doing anything to help her. So I got off of the snowfield onto the rock, went down maybe 200 feet and saw her sitting up in the water screaming at me.
So did you go ahead and cross the snowbank?
Yeah.
Okay, and then there was a way of getting down. Was this all rope stuff to get down, or
No, it was just scrambling. I mean, so I had my micro spikes on my feet, so it wasn't dangerous for me to get across the snow. So I just cruised right through it. I mean, but I could have done that right away, but I just had that frozen moment where I was
Yeah.
in shock. Yeah.
Man, I can't even imagine. So you get over there, you're starting to make your trek down to her, but you could see she was alive.
Yeah. Yep. She was pretty. I was really, really happy, but I was also really terrified because I knew that if she was sitting in that really cold water, that she wasn't able to move herself. So she was obviously pretty hurt.
Man, and what kicks in? Your instincts of kicking in is it like, oh man, what am I going to do when I get to her? What if she's all busted up? How am I going to get her down?
I don't really remember exactly. I felt pretty robotic at that point. Like once I got through the shock, it was like, okay, we got to get her somewhere dry, secured, do a little bit of triage and see if she hit her head or something. Because I was sure she was missing her helmet, and I was sure she hit her head somewhere. So
Yeah.
I was just talking to her, and she was really lucid and with it. So we got her secured, and you hit the emergency button that you never think you're going to hit, and then it just becomes about coordinating as much as possible.
Tell me what this device is. And obviously, none of the stuff you guys had was through Verizon.
No, that
Obviously.
no, absolutely not.
Because if you're with me, you're screwed. Because I can't even get Verizon on the street, let
Yeah.
alone in a.
I think their motto is everywhere but your house.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Everywhere but where I want to make a call.
Exactly.
God, I'm glad we're sitting here being able to laugh about all this stuff at this point.
Yeah. No, it's a satellite device. So it basically it's a GPS enabled device that the one I had then is pretty primitive compared to what we have now, right? Like now we basically carry like almost what's a satellite phone where you can text two-way, with satellite.
Yeah.
But back then I had one custom message that I could send, basically saying I'm okay, and that would send it to whoever's on the list. And I could also call on the cavalry and hit the SOS button. Now, what that tells, all that does is sends a message to the concierge for Spot in Texas that says there's been some sort of issue, and it blows up my wife, it blows up my mother-in-law, and so they're all calling each other. And luckily, like Jen said, I was able to get through to my wife really quick, explain what happened. I was texting with Justin, but then search and rescue got a typical search and rescue is not very fast. They got to us about as fast as you could possibly get, I guess a rescue together.
Because they've got to organize, determine what kind of landscape they're dealing with. Did they come from the top or the bottom?
They ended up coming from the bottom, but so I mean these are just to give shout out to these people. I mean these are all strangers who are volunteers from all across the state. So there were three teams, right? So there was the Custer County team, there's a Saguache County team. Where Crestone Peak is, it straddles two counties. So it's on Saguache County and it's in Custer County. So there was a little bit of who's taking the lead here, and Custer County had more resources, so they took it. But there's also what I like to call the Rock Ninjas, the
Western Mountain Rescue.
Yeah, and they were the ones who did like the super technical, setting up the anchors and stuff like that. Yeah, but the state of mind was once we got all the communication done, and I was confident that they knew where we were. It was just settle in and wait it out.
So this device, it sends a GPS signal with all your coordinates and knows exactly where you're at.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then I'm assuming those guys probably know then what the terrain is of where you're located.
And I was able to tell, like Jen said, I was able to talk to the sheriff, and I had my GPS that I bring in addition to that. So I was able to give them our coordinates just in case the Spot device wasn't super accurate.
And was she coming in and out and?
A little bit. She freaked me out a few times. I mean, like, we were just telling stupid stories and, trying to keep each other, stood up. But she got down a few times. Am I going to make it? That was tough to listen to.
Yeah, it's your friend, but at least you're alive and you get one more shot at it anyway.
Yeah.
So these guys come up from the bottom and then they start hoisting this stuff down. Obviously, that in and of itself has to be extremely dangerous, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's just dead weight coming down that terrain. And what do? They anchor.
Yeah.
And then they go down a little bit further, anchor again, and bring you down.
Mm-hmm.
Set up like a rope system, right? Where you're on one, and then they set the other, and then you have to transfer over.
And how long did it take them to get you down from that spot once they got to you?
So they started, I think, lowering me somewhere around like 8 o'clock at night. It was just right before it got dark, and they had a 1 o'clock was the National Guard said was their like cutoff for coming back for pickup, and they got me down about 12:45.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. Don't they still have to get you even? Is there really a time?
So the way with the National Guard, those guys have to make decisions, and they had been flying. Those particular pilots had been on a different mission earlier in the day, and they're starting to get to the end of their. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's not just the fuel; it's actually the the ability of those guys to make good decisions from being in up in the copter for so long, right? And being tired and stuff. And so we were right at the end of their window. It was like the last. I was very, very lucky. Otherwise, you're sitting it out at the lake to the next morning until a different, somebody that can't fly on night vision could come in, because you could send in a medical helicopter if it wasn't dark.
Yeah.
But these guys came in on night vision. I was very, very lucky to get out when I did.
Extremely. So really, only military was going to be able to get you.
Yeah.
Because that's the only one that has the night vision. Oh my God.
And in that kind of terrain, right? I mean, the way that terrain is.
You feel like I felt like. Like a Taliban fighter. Like they're like the choppers come and I was like, I can't hear it. All of a sudden, it's just on you like that, and those guys are really amazing in that kind of terrain. At that, with just night vision. We had to turn off all of all of our headlamps, so we didn't mess with their night vision. And they were able to get Jen and I out. They were talking about, to Jen's point, having us waited out the night in the cottonwood drainage, but just hopped in there and got her really latched down. And the guy, I remember getting in the helicopter, and I didn't have a harness or anything. I was like, "Where's my harness?" The guy's like, "Hold on." So I did, and we were terrified because the search and rescue team, the entire day we were hanging out with them, they were talking about how horrible the ride in was on the Blackhawk. Like we were getting bumped to death. So I'm just like, "Oh, this is going to be hell." But it was just smooth sailing on the way out. Yeah. Next thing you know, we've gone from freezing to sweating and being bitten by mosquitoes in Crestone. So
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you make it if you miss that 15-minute window because of the collapsed lung. Not good.
Well, I was very, very lucky in that when the Western Mountain Rescue guys, they came in on the second iteration. The Blackhawk had actually gone back to get those guys and bring them in. And so when they came, they actually had bottled oxygen. So about halfway, into this, I was able to get on. They were able to put me on some oxygen, and that helped tremendously.
Yeah.
You
obviously knew something was wrong because you can't take a deep breath, but you thought maybe it was just ribs broken.
I was fighting for everyone. It seemed like it was really hard to breathe.
Wow. It's just an amazing, amazing story.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, what'd your wife say when you walked in? Don't ever do that to me again.
She knew. She says, "Well, it was my birthday the next day, actually."
Yeah. We should tell that part.
Yeah. They thought there was something really wrong with her because when they transferred her from the Blackhawk to the medical copter that took her to Colorado Springs, she goes, "Happy birthday, Adam," and they're like, "Oh man, she's delirious."
Like, "She's losing it."
Yeah.
She's losing it. And he was like, "No, it really is my birthday."
Yeah. So my family was all right. So the process of getting home at that point, unfortunately, in that part of the Sangre de Cristos, there's no pass, right? So they landed, we drove to the east side of the Sangre de Cristos and camped over there. They landed on the west side of it. So I got put up by the Saguache County Search and Rescue. And they put the Custer County people up too at a firefighter training station for the night. Very grateful for that. But the next morning we had to get up, drive an hour around north to Salida, and then come back down to West Cliff, and had to hike back in and get all of our stuff and go back. So I didn't get home until like 10 that night, basically. And my wife took one look at me and she said, "You were a wreck, so I wasn't going to pile on." Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I just, we hear this story, but that had to be tough on the families too. I mean, it has to be just an amazingly tough thing to hear, not know, wonder. And I think we have to go ahead and finish out the story. You have a beautiful baby boy, right?
I do.
And all of that, you carried it, no problems. Well, there was one more helicopter ride.
Not a helicopter ride, but a flight for life plane ride. After I healed up a bit, I went back to one of my other passions, which is coaching ice hockey. And I went up to a girls' hockey tournament up in Steamboat in December. And my son decided that he wanted to make his appearance 8 weeks early. And so my water actually broke during this hockey tournament up in Steamboat. And this is for coaching, not playing. Obviously, right. I wasn't playing while pregnant. But, and so, I ended up in the hospital in Steamboat during a snowstorm for 36 hours. And then they had to send a flight for life plane in to get us out of here so that I could. So he came 8 weeks early and did a stint in the NICU, and then has been healthy and happy.
So he'd already been on plane rides before he was even born, a couple plane rides.
Some people just don't want to fly commercial,
I guess so. Always into the whole private thing.
Yeah.
So everything is good. Everything is healthy. You're back to doing what you do, but you still are climbing.
I am still climbing. Yes.
And we talked a little off camera. I think I would have a big problem with that if my wife said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to go climb again."
Yeah, it's definitely something that we've had to, the fact of the matter is my husband knew who I was when he married me. It was not like I picked up this habit after.
Fair enough.
We got married. But that said, it has definitely, taken a toll on us. But we also have worked through those things and we approach it differently these days. I'm not climbing the kind of stuff I was climbing before. I realize I have children at home now and it's more important to make it home at the end of the day than it is to get a summit in, right? But I still do love to climb and be outside. That's not going to change, but I definitely have a very different approach to it these days.
Well, I tell you what, I am so glad that you guys came on to tell this story. This is actually one of my favorite ones. This is really incredible, especially since it turned out as well as it did. But we often talk about this. You know, I don't have a fear of heights per se, but I know a lot of times I've been up at the top of these things, I'm looking over and had that feeling. And so I can only imagine actually having that feeling right as you're sliding down. And I think you just told the story just amazingly well, and I'm so grateful that you're here alive to tell the rest of it, obviously. Maybe a touch of crazy still mountain climbing, but I'm going to let you decide how all that works. Are you still climbing pretty tough stuff?
I haven't climbed I don't think I've climbed anything like that since, I don't think so. No. Since the accident, but yeah.
Well, I got to ask you the same question though. You have any fear of heights now?
Oh, absolutely. I had a healthy fear of heights before. They used to call me Shaky Arms Adam whenever I was on something super exposed. So now the deck's a little level set there now.
Super shaky arms Adam now.
Yeah. No, it's something that just kind of fades a little bit every year, but it's. I think Jen can speak for herself, but my worldview is completely changed after that. Like I used to be like, oh, I'm going to bag all these things. Now I'm just kind of like, if my kids lose their dad this way, that is the stupidest thing in the world. You know,
so fascinating, isn't it? I used to love to ride motorcycles as fast as you could ride them, and I had my daughter, and I'm like, yeah, done. I haven't been on one since. It's kind of wild how it happens. But I'm glad you guys are still climbing. I'm glad you're still doing what you enjoy doing. But I'm sure it's a little bit safer. And but what an amazing story. Again, thank you guys so much for coming on. I appreciate it, and I think people are going to find this one really entertaining. I know I sure did.
Thanks a lot for having us.
All right, thank you guys.